Um, Thank you for inviting me. I apologize also for the change in topic, but this is close. We're going to go a bit deeper into something a bit later in the year when we pick it up a bit further. Um, eh, but I can say that in the last month I've I happen to be the chair of two different conferences. One of them is called Building Business Capability, which is the official conference of the IIBA, and that was held in Toronto this year at home base. Um, and also, I chaired just 2 weeks ago a conference in London, which was all about business transformation, business architecture, and service design. And it these conferences were very, very interesting this year because a year ago it was all about AI, and it was all about the tools and the techniques of AI and so on. This year there's quite a distinct change, um, because both of those conferences, all the discussion was about the humans in the process. The fact that it's not just about AI, and the fact that that AI is a very, very powerful tool, but also can be used inappropriately. So I think this is good news. It's good news for a lot of people that yes, it's happening all around us. And as business analysts, really, we've got to be really good at doing this stuff. But it's not, the AI is not going to replace the business analyst. There's still lots of things for us to be able to do. And the other thing that became very, very clear in the conferences this year was that there is sort of a return to process thinking. Um, and I can tell you, having been in this space for quite some time, that every 3 to 4 years, everybody says it's dead, it's going away, we don't need it anymore. And then all of a sudden, people realize we still have to do work. And if we're doing work, we need a process. And if different people are doing work, we need a process. And you can even say if AI is doing work, they're just a co-worker in our process. And so we still have to sort of get get all of this figured out. Otherwise, we do transformation, but we can't just give it away. We've got to be intelligent, we've got to be smart, and this is good news for all of us. And so that's really what I'm going to talk about today, is how all of this all comes together. Now, I would encourage questions. Please put them in the chat, and we'll monitor those, and we can have a good conversation if you wish, back and forth. That's really good, because there will be questions, I'm sure, in your mind about how does all this come together. And I think you can see on the right hand side of the screen, well, it's the image of my business architecture book, but there's also an image of something called cohesion. And the idea behind a lot of this is that organizations have to be cohesive. You can't afford for things to not work. And that means things have to be designed to work together, because otherwise they won't work. Either the various processes have to work together, or the different enablers of those processes have to be intelligently brought forward. So we're going to talk a bit about how all of that goes. So, um, and I hate to say this, but I've used this slide for 15 years, and it's no more true. It's more true today than it was when I first started using it. And if I only have one slide that I can go into the chief executive and give them a slide, this is it. Okay. And so what is our job? Our job as analysts and designers and architects is to build value. And so let's break that down as to what really is involved in all of this. You know, at the beginning, no money has been spent and no time has gone by. And then we get this great idea for a transformation, and we start to build up new processes, new systems, new capabilities until we get to the point where it's ready. And so then we launch it, we put it into marketplace, and we start to get some return on our investment. By the way, this period of time that says time to market, it's a big assumption that we're even never going to get there. I'm sure that you've all seen these big projects, these big transformations that you sink all kinds of millions sometimes of dollars into them, and they're never released because they don't work. They fail when we try it out. And so we say, okay, we've wasted that time. So that time in market is a big one, right? Definitely a big one. By the way, we've also wasted all the money we spent and all the resources we've had working on this because they haven't been working on something else. But let's be positive. Let's be positive. Um, so at this point in time, we've said, okay, now we're ready to earn. And so we're going to keep earning until we pass the cost. We get a return on our investment. This is what executives are very interested in. They want to get a return on their investment because someone has justified through a business case that it's going to be worth putting this money and putting this time in. And then, so the idea being that we'll get our money back. We'll get our return back. By the way, this line, which is time to break even, is also quite optimistic. There are lots of times when what we put out in the marketplace doesn't work. Nobody's interested. It's just not seen as being valuable. So, but let's be optimistic and say we do get to this point where we are getting value back until the point where it reaches the end of its life, and that is the time in market and then the time in value and so on. So here's a really good question. What is our job? Our job, the people in the organization who have funded these initiatives, they have funded us to do our job. And our job is to make one of four things happen. Okay. And if you're with me, I would ask you, what is it that has to come down? All right. And even though people sometimes don't talk about this, we find often that we've got to get there, and operationally, as well as from a development point of view, we've got to be cheaper than we were before. We've got to do this project and keep on going. I see Eunice is coming into the meeting, so should we let her in? Yes, we'll let Eunice in. Hello, Eunice. And so yeah, we have to do it for less. And even though they don't talk about it, there's always a cost factor in all of this. That's one thing we need to do. The other thing we need to do is we need to have high quality. It has to work. It has to resonate. It has to sell. And so our first job is to take this line and this line and just go like this, stretch it out like this. This is what we have to do. So we do better requirements, we do better implementation, we do it for a fair price, and so on. So by the way, these two directions were very much what happened with continuous improvement, Lean, Six Sigma, all those great techniques that we saw before. That was the job. Now, but today what's happening is something else is happening. And this one is absolutely critical. We can't take 3 years. We can't take 2 years. We've got to put something in place so I can start to take advantage of the opportunity before the marketplace changes and it's no longer relevant. So I've got to get there very, very, very soon. And this is one of the things that we're going to talk about is how fast can we make a change happen in the organization with our products and services, to get that going. The last one of these we have to do is we've got to keep it going longer. We, it used to be we had 5, 6 years, maybe even longer, to be able to take the advantage of what we've done. But now it doesn't, it's out of date so fast, um, that if we are taking longer, and it 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 doesn't pay off for us. So I can tell you that these days, especially with the move towards business architecture, our job is to do this: go sooner and keep it longer. There's all kinds of design issues. You have to design so that it can be easily changed and can stay longer relevant, stay relevant longer, I should say. And so our job is like, your job is on this page. And so this is driving all kinds of issues, because the pressures are on us to not take too long, to keep it relevant, and don't spend all of our budget, and not get any value back for it. Okay, so this is a pretty simple slide, but it really speaks volumes to what we're all about. The other slide I will also use at the beginning when I'm talking to the executives. If I get 2 slides, this is my second slide. And so an organization cannot be strong if it's not functional internally. And we all recognize this. We've all seen it, that the people inside the organization and the divisions and departments they're in, it doesn't fit, it doesn't connect, it breaks down. We have all kinds of corrective issues. Just all you, I mean, as a customer, you recognize this, and all you got to do is have a problem with your mobile phone, or a problem with your online banking, or a problem with whatever. Try to navigate your way through this organization, and you get handed off over and over and over and over again, to people who don't understand the problem, and you got to explain it 5 times. So organizationally, we have to get our act together. So my point is that all the pieces of work have to connect, and so it's a big challenge, and it threatens our cohesion. We're not going to be cohesive if those pieces are not aligned. And so operationally, they have to be aligned, but you have to design them to be aligned. So the days of dealing with a small piece of the puzzle and just working on that as a business analyst, I think those days are gone. You have to take a much wider view. You have to see how everything connects. And you got to start with the outside world, like the customer, and go all the way through, or maybe it goes out to the supplier and it goes through 8 different departments and it comes back to the customer. That has to work. And this is why the processes are not going away, and they're absolutely essential. So processes are going to be there for a while. And let me go on another little journey here. You all recognize we had Taylor Swift here last year. Remember that? And she did the Eras tour, and so we even have the Process Eras tour. So business process has been around for a while. And the first phase, we focused on efficiency and standardization. I'm happy to say that I wasn't around at that point in time, so don't blame me. But basically, the first era of process work was all about control. It was all about standardization. And the Industrial Revolution gave us that, because we wanted to do the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, and do it consistently, and do it according to standard. And we just train people to do that. The second era is really connecting things together. We started with the business systems, which is stayed from the 40s to 70s. Also happy to say I wasn't around then. I was around, but I wasn't working by that time. And so, and it was all about making sure everything worked together. And so we did that for a while. And then we had another era, which we were really focused on getting all the errors out and looking at improvement. It was all about quality management and optimizing the things we were doing. Um, so the next era after that was, and if you remember any of you doing this, doing your customer journeys and looking at how is value created. It's all about customer experience and working in backwards, right? So what happened after that? And what's still happening today? The whole era of learning, iterating, doing better, finding improvements, and being agile as a business started in the last decade. And if you look at us where we are now, we're very much in the area of human and machine collaboration. So the process is still there, but it's not just the humans who are doing the process with a machine. The machine is part of the process flow. And so this whole intelligence and autonomy, it's happening big time right now. And this is what AI is doing for us or to us. I don't know which one you want to pick. But basically, so we're trying to work all the way through here. We've had some lessons learned here. It's like when Taylor Swift does does her Eras tour, she sings songs from all of her eras, and it's sort of like us. We're still singing songs from all of the previous eras. So all these prior things we learned, but we're building on top, right? So that's what I'm saying. It's not going away. We still have to do our work. And we still have to sort of go forward in all of this stuff that we were looking at before. So basically, then what we're saying here is we still have to design the work. All errors brought us some benefit. We don't throw out what we did before. We're not throwing out defects. We're not throwing out the idea that we need improvements. We're not throwing out the idea that we have customer journeys. We're not throwing out the fact that we learn as we go. We just have something added on top of all of that. So keep going on what you're doing before. So when we start to talk about cohesion, the opposite of cohesion is fragmentation. I think we've all had, if we had enough time, I would ask everybody to give me an example of fragmentation. This is one of mine. I had purchased a computer here in Vancouver. I registered it in the Toronto office. I put in the warranty card and all that kind of stuff. So that was when I first bought it. But then I had a problem, and I knew I needed to get it fixed. So I went into the Vancouver Service Center, and I said, "My computer's not working. Can you fix it?" And they said, "Yes, sir, we can fix it, but you need an authorization number." I said, "What do you mean I need an authorization number?" Um, I registered this, and here's my registration for the warranty and stuff like that. And they said, "I'm sorry, sir, we don't have access to that system, so you're going to have to call this other number." And so they gave me a number to call, and I waited online, talked to the people in Philadelphia, and they said to me, "Well," this is after I waited 45 minutes online, of course, right? So they said to me, "Well, I can't give you an authorization number now. You actually have two problems. So you need to talk to the people in San Jose. So and don't worry, we'll give you another number." And I said to them right away, I said, "They're going to ask me the same questions, aren't they? What's the model number? What's the serial number? Where do you live?" And so now I'm thinking, okay, because when I got over there, they asked me the same question. And I said, "It's okay, but I've got a reference number from the people in Philadelphia, and they said, I'm sorry, sir, we don't have access to that system. And so, and so then they did something for me. I had to go back to the people in Philadelphia, and I got really, really happy, but then I realized I wasn't getting my computer fixed. I was just getting an access number, which would authorize me to get it fixed. So I took it in with my authorization number in Vancouver, and things went deadly silent for a couple of weeks. So I tried to phone and said, "Oh, what's going on with my computer?" And they said, "Oh, hi, sir. Well, we've sent it to San Francisco to get it fixed." Oh, that's nice to know. And so I said, "Well, what's going on?" They said, "Well, I don't know, but here's a number for San Francisco. Call them up." I finally got through to the people in San Francisco, and the people in San Francisco, and I swear this is true, said to me, "Yes, we're fixing your computer now, but when we finish, we're going to have to erase your hard drive." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, according to all the rules, it can't cross the border. We have to erase your hard drive." I said, "No." And so I said, "Hang on, I have to come into the California." So I went down, went to the office. I managed to talk to the person, and the person said, "But we have a rule, and the rule is we have to, you can only pick it up where you dropped it off, which was in Vancouver." And so I managed to talk the person into giving me my computer, and I carried it across the border. Have you all had a problem like this? Like where you spend hours and hours and hours, and we've all had these issues, right? This is what we call fragmentation. This is what we call lack of cohesion, because everyone in each department is doing their own thing, and no one is looking at the customer journey. No one is looking at the entire thing. This should have been a really, really simple situation, that we're dealing with. And so it's a true story. And the interesting thing is, this was a few years ago. The interesting thing is that company is no longer in the personal laptop computing business. They don't even sell them anymore. And I'd like to think I had a little bit to say with all this. Because, by the way, at the end of this whole thing, they sent me a customer satisfaction survey about what did I think about their great service, right? So no one is talking to anybody else. So this is the challenge that we're facing. We can't have fragmentation. We have to take it from the customer perspective, looking back in, or the external perspective. Everybody talks about stakeholders. The only stakeholders that are really important are the outsiders. Your suppliers, your regulatory bodies, and all the other people who interact with you to make you successful. Now, let's have a look at what else might happen here. Okay. Now, last month, about a month and a half ago, I had to go to Calgary for an IIBA meeting. It was a live meeting. And so I thought, well, I'm only going overnight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shave before I go because I'm going the same day. And just as I was finishing, my shaver self-destructed, it all blew up, and the parts went everywhere. Oh my gosh, but I was lucky I was almost done, right? I had to be really careful about what side of my face I showed. I was almost done when I went into Calgary. But before I got on the plane, I went to the website, found the broken part, ordered it, went to Calgary, flew home the next day, and my replacement part was there and everything was okay. This is cohesion. So think about it. I was not worried. I trusted them. But any one of 1,000 things could have gone wrong, and I would not have gotten my part. And so this idea that fragmentation is loud, cohesion is quiet. It's like you don't even notice it. But our job is to build things cohesively, to get that process working end to end. in the best possible way we can. And it's almost like I didn't even notice it. I didn't even notice this. It just worked. And that's what I want. I want all of if you're working on a problem, I want you to see where it fits in the end to end. And I want you to make sure that the parts are connected up to, to, to make this come true. So what have we learned from all this? From an overall business point of view, if you can be a leader, but if your alignment, all these pieces, if it breaks, the customer experience is really, really noticeable. And if you disrupt and pieces aren't working together, it attracts competition. It attracts this weakness uh, is bad for the company. And I can tell you something that our customers are not loyal anymore. They don't have time to be loyal. They'll easily switch to somebody else. And before your market collapses, you lose trust. And so all of this ends up being about being trustworthy, even though it may not be noticeable, but it ends up as being a trustworthy thing. So I come back to this diagram here. If I've got a customer, they send me an order request, and it could be through the website, or it could be a phone call to the call center. The order request somehow comes in. We magically, as far as they're concerned, this is what I want. I want them to see this box as a box, and somehow, like in my example, I got the product. I prepaid it, so I didn't really have an invoice, but I got a payment, right? So this is what I want to happen. If this customer, like in my first case, has to know who's doing what inside the box, then you know that something is wrong. Like I can tell you, as a frequent flyer, I managed to get the phone number of the lost luggage department at Air Canada. And it was the priority number which cut through all the noise and got in quickly first. Why did I have that number? Because I'd lost luggage too many times with the airline and I had to follow it up. And I managed to get that number along the way. So the point being is that if you know all the things that are happening inside the box, then there's something wrong. It should be dead simple. And this is true of all of our external stakeholders. So my point here is always start with the outside of the box and trace your way through and say, how can we keep this information flowing? How can I keep the process working? How can I make sure all the different people and all the different robots, say, that work on this, they're all aligned. So we have to design for those connections, is really what I'm saying. So, by the way, it's more fun when you do that than any other way. So what could be so hard is really the question. Now, you get into difficulty when your customer's point of view and your regulator's point of view and your owner's point of view are in conflict with each other. That's your job to figure that out. At least understand the perspectives and sort out with the executives or with your the people that you're working with inside the business. Figure out how you're going to reconcile these three things, because I'm sorry that there's so many cases where I cannot meet the regulator requirement and the customer requirement and the owner requirement all at the same time. Someone's got to decide. But I want to have that discussion early, not when I implement the system. I want to get it as early as possible. Okay. So what we're saying then is outside the box is the customer, but we have these multiple points of view. But there are value streams go from the outside all the way through and go back to the outside again. This is the operating model inside. Now, if we're doing all this stuff, by the way, generative AI, if you're doing your analysis, ask the questions about what this could be and what is required, and you can get a lot of really rapid knowledge without interviewing 30 people to find out what it is. the generative AI is very, very helpful. It's helpful for you in your job as a BA. So, okay. Um, Now, what am I looking for when I start to look at that external outside in point of view? So this is the beginning of your process, right? So what do I give to them? What do I get from them? What information, what knowledge, what money, what, a variety of different things are exchanged. So that's the first thing we do. That is the first thing we do. And say, okay, are we really clear? What is the information, transition, transformation, and so on. The second thing we're going to do to make sure it makes sense is identify the benefits that those people get. So, what is what was the benefit of me getting my razor back, my electric razor back? Well, it wasn't the razor, it was the fact I could get a shave if I had to get a shave and go somewhere else the next day. It was my ability to look half decent, at least not too unruly, going when I'm going the next way. So it's the so what. I gave you this item. So what? Why is this important to you? And so what we tend to do, we articulate what that's going to be from each of the perspectives of the outside. And the last one of these three that we look at is how did you feel in that experience? Um, I had a recent experience with one of the local, I can't use the name, unfortunately. So with one of the local TV services, internet services providers, I swear I spent 5 hours, 5 hours of my life on and off the phone, talking to multiple people, trying out different types of things. They fixed it, but the experience was horrendous. And so there are so many times when people say, "Yeah, we got everything we're looking for," but I will still never deal with them again. Right? I still would never deal with them. If I have the choice, I'll go somewhere else. What's differentiating us today is the experience. Keeping it simple, keeping it easy is really what we're trying to do as best we can. So so then from this, I look at each of the stakeholders. I'm going to get what I call my North Star. I'm going to figure out what's important. Again, I can use generative AI to figure some of this stuff out. It's really helpful. And I can figure out what my measurement system is going to be. I can figure out how am I going to measure my effectiveness? How am I going to measure my efficiency? How will I measure my quality, my standards, my compliance? And how will I measure how flexible I am to be able to be agile as a business? So the question is, do your standard transactions only work for 10% of the transactions? But I really want it to be agile and flexible enough to do things this way. This is a really important slide for you. I think that no matter what you're doing, ask yourself the question, who cares? What do they care about? How will I measure it? And how will I put all of it together in a way that I can balance these conflicts off against each other? It's before you start doing any analysis inside the box, we're going to deal with the outside of the box. Okay. All right. So inside the box, customers, by the way, this is true. Customers don't care about the inside of the box, but we have to. We have to get the right value streams. And that is this line, which flows all the way through and it can even go outside and come back in again. We have to figure out what this is. And it's got nothing to do with the org chart. This is the hard part, right? It's got nothing to do with the org chart. The other thing we have to do here is find out what are the concepts. I'm going to talk a bit about that. So what are the information concepts or information objects in some people's terminology? And we need to start looking at business capabilities. Um, I I did some work with a phone company in Australia last year, and we looked at their planning. One of their end-to-end value streams was called order to activate. They use the opening, the trigger, and they use the closing event. Order to activate. But there were five different divisions that had an order to activate. There was an awful lot of similarities, but there were some slight differences. They had five different projects on the books because each division wanted its own project, and they kept saying, we're different, we're different, we're different. I really want to produce one business capability to be able to do that and not have five different ones because now I've got four teams which are doing redundant work, which could be doing something new, and I'm not sharing this capability. So look at all the value streams, you look at all the capabilities, and there's a many-to-many relationship. Also, when I design this, I have to design it knowing that it is going to change, but not knowing how it's going to change. So I want to isolate as much as possible the different things and assemble them. It's like Lego. I can like my grandkids in Australia are big on Lego, but they can build a lot of different things with Lego, and they can pull a piece off and put another one on, and it's crazy. So that's the thinking I want us to be able to take, build from standard components, and be able to easily disassemble them and put them together again. The other thing that has to be done here is the organizational culture has to be aligned. Like I I don't want the people in sales getting measured on volume of sales and the people in customer service being measured on customer satisfaction and happiness when the salespeople are selling them garbage which they're not happy with and they wish they weren't sold to. So it's got to be aligned. Again, generative AI can really help you with this. So let me stop here and just for a moment and say, um, do we have any questions so far? Is this bonkers or
Yes, we have
is this?
one.
Yes, please.
Okay, it says, in your experience, when do organizations normally consider that process design is done or should be completed?
Okay, so what I would say is that well, there's two parts to this, right? You always have to have some amount of analysis that says how do we do things now? And then the next level is, well, from an interaction point of view, um, can I define all the swim lanes, all the data handoffs, and all of the rules and other things like that, which are requirements for what that process needs to do? So I would say that design is done at that point in time. But that doesn't mean I have all the people trained. It doesn't mean I have the new organization structure, if there is one. It doesn't mean my systems are supporting what we're doing there. And these days, it doesn't mean that your agentic AI agents have been defined either. So, or have been developed, I should say. So there's a point there where I will run scenarios against that process. I'll run all the different conditions I can think of and just walk it through in a sort of a desk check, and try to think of anything to test it. Part of our job is to test it. So I suppose that is going to get you through to a certain point, but I always want you to be looking at it. I always want you to be questioning, have the conditions changed? Uh, is the marketplace changing? Are the rules changing? So I want someone to be responsible for continuing to evaluate that process. Other questions? Anything else yet? Don't be afraid to put up the questions as we keep going here, because we're going to have a bit of time to be able to look at them all.
We'll take
So
another one.
yes,
Could you give a little bit more context about how a multidimensional shared business capability is designed? Any
Okay.
simple example?
Yeah. Okay. Let's take the example of identity management, right? We have so many things that we have to do today where we have to be sure that who we're dealing with is who they say they are. They're not fraudulent. They're not, you know, they're not trying to get around us and get into our systems and so on. Um, I have a lot of different ways into our organization. So what I want to be able to do is say, I need to be able to identify these people, and to be able to be sure that who I'm getting is the right person. But I don't want every workflow or every process to invent its own. I don't need 7 different ways of doing that. I need one way. And so there is, when we do requirements for, or when we start to define what that process is going to be, we need to talk to all of the people who are going to need identity management. And so I build out the capability called identity management, not identity management for this and identity management for that and identity management for something else. Um, so what that means is it means I have to know what all the processes are. So I need a process inventory or process architecture. And I need to be able to figure out whether those identity managements truly are more or less the same, or maybe the variations are kept in one small little place, but most of it is the same working across all. So I have a capability model and I have a process model. I need to be able to say, where is this capability used in my processes? Which processes need this capability? So as a business analyst, it's not just talking to the people who have asked you to do this project. You've got to talk to the other people who potentially could use this solution. And so I I build it once and I don't build it 7 times. Hopefully that makes a bit of sense. So what I'm saying is it needs business architecture. I think all business analysts are, you've got to step up to some of the things that business architecture is asking you to do. You got to find out, if I change this, what are all the places where it's affected? So if you continue that thought process, somebody comes along and says, change this because it's not working. Before I change it, I've got to look at all the other places that use it because maybe it's working for them. And if I change it, it's not going to work for them anymore. So I need to know the impact of change before I start to make the change, if that makes any sense. Okay. Okay, let's do a bit more. This one, I think this is really key. Um, until very recently, we really weren't doing much of this. People would thought about this type of thing as something which is in the data world, and so I need an order database. I need a customer database. I need a database of agreements, and so on. But and so people used to think, yes, it's about data. But what we often find is that when we're doing process work, people don't understand what these words are, or they understand them in a different way. And it is, I hate to say it, it's our job to get them to speak the same language. And they don't speak the same language, especially if you're in an organization that's been acquired by another company. The semantics are all different. Um, and by the way, the word we were not allowed to use until very recently was the word, it's called ontology. What do words mean? But now apparently it's okay again. So in this case here, all it really does is it shows the fundamental relationship. So here, for example, a customer commits to a financial service agreement. If the customer does not commit to the financial service agreement, then they're not a customer, right? And once we've done that, the customer places the order. But then when they place the order, the financial service agreement prices the order, which authorizes a financial transaction, which updates the statement of account. So this simple diagram is a diagram of meaning, and it's always the first thing I do. I always want to make sure I get this understood. By the way, for you data people, these arrows do not imply one-to-many relationship. It's just how you read the diagram. Customer places order. Customer commits to financial service agreement. Order secures a financial service. The agreement is made for a financial service. But the regulation constrains the financial service, and the regulator has authority for the regulation. This is called a truth statement. These are truth statements. This is just the way it is. And I have found so many times that if you get this right, it makes your life so much easier than it would have been otherwise, right? So generative AI is really good at this. And you have to define what is a concept. You have to define what you mean by these types of things. Otherwise, you may, like you do, but this is true with anything in generative AI. You have to give it examples. You have to show the structure behind all of this. But if I look at this, this is really, it's not my process, but it shows up in my process. And we have at least one person on this call I know right now whose boss's boss said to me once, if I had this the day I started, I would have been 3 months ahead of the game, because it just explains to me the fundamental nature of the business. Now, it also becomes, I can derive my data. I can figure out what my processes are, because you know what? I have a customer life cycle. All the things I do to customers, I have an order life cycle. I have a partner life cycle. I have an agreement life cycle. So I can find my processes out of this. And also I can find my business rules out of this. So a customer places order. Well, okay. Can a customer place order if they haven't paid up their statement of account for 3 months? Then maybe the rule is that I can find my rules. So I can derive a lot about this stuff, which keeps me aligned, and it keeps things making sense. And it's really, really worth it. Now, people might say, yeah, but why are you doing this? We know all this already. They don't. They think they know it all already. But I highly recommend this is really going to help your processes as you move forward. Any questions on that? Because I've made some pretty bold statements there. Anybody doing this stuff? Anybody wanting to do this? Yes, no, thumbs up, hearts flying. Okay. All right. So do it. And you can ask a question. Now I'm going to get to the part about how the processes connect the dots. And so in the way I tend to look at process is a bit like a SIPOC, if anyone's ever used SIPOC, which says supplier, input, process, output, customer. Supplier, input, process, output, customer. Now, our rules on this are the supplier is the supplier of this information for the process is either an external stakeholder or it's another internal process. This is not a person. This is not a department. This is not an organization. I'm trying to define the work. Okay. So what is it? It's materials. It can be information. It can be the state, like an unhappy customer. And out of this, there's materials have been transformed. I've taken the flour in the water and I've made croissants, something like that. It can be updated information, or it can be I've taken that unhappy customer and made them a happy customer, right? So this all connects this way. But I'm adding two other things. I'm adding the idea that I have guides or rules or policies or This data is not transformed. This data is used to action this process. So reference data, like, I cannot deliver a pizza outside the territory of my franchise. Well, okay, what's the territory of my franchise? Unless I change that territory, um, I'm not going to accept an order. Policies and rules, lots of policies and rules, and all kinds, just knowledge. You gain an awful lot of knowledge through experience. And also, we also put in place here the enablers. So these are the technologies, the facilities, the equipment, physical things, and there's also the humans, the roles, and so on. So when we look at a process, if we can get a really quick start with generative AI to figure out what these things are, if you ask it quite well, for example, when you say, "What are all the things that guide me in doing this?" But remember, a guide is not transformed or consumed, but an input is transformed or consumed, and it produces an output. You have to put the right prompts in to be able to get this. So what I'm saying is, if you're working on a process of some kind, you should know what other processes it interacts with. Because if I source poor information, this process is not going to work, right? So if I'm looking at what's making this tick, I can find out, do I have a problem with the external stakeholder or the other internal processes? Therefore, I know what I need to fix if I'm going to be able to do this. We call this a process scoping diagram. It's really, really quite helpful in getting going. Now, so how does that all show up? My value stream is in the middle. My business data is here, right? Including reference data as opposed to data to be updated or consumed. I have business performance data, which I should always be measuring what I'm doing in my process. I have business rules or guidelines or experience, perhaps, to do some of that stuff. And then I have to build capabilities. Now we do a lot of capability building, but if I don't understand all this other stuff here, then I can't articulate what my capability is needed and what those resources are going to be doing in terms of pulling this forward. And as a result of this, I'm going to produce value for my stakeholders based upon doing all of that external analysis that we did before. So inside the box, though, now if we go inside, how do we design the flow of the work? What information goes across that process? Now I can answer that question. What are the policies and rules? What are the capabilities, resources, people? And what are the behaviors and what's the culture necessary to optimize the work, not just in that division or that department, across the board. Now we're into the world of agentic AI. Because I mean, it's a year ago it was all about generative. This year it's all about agentic. Everyone wants to put agents in place, even though apparently, according to Harvard Business Review, of all the agentic AI experiments, 97% never see the light of day. They never get implemented. So I think it's still early days, but we should be learning. Okay. So let's see then a familiar friend. This is sort of my business. This is a business process, complaints and claims. So the customer basically submits an issue. It goes through a bunch of analysis and goes back and forth and back and forth until and so we still are going to use this. But when we did that other chart before, which we call an IGO chart, input, guide, output, enabler, the starting event and the closing event should be matched to your BPMN diagram. So then, in other words, this should be all fitting in within that bigger picture. The role, the people doing the work, these should be roles, not positions, not organizations, not specific people. It should be a role, so if the person changes or the organization changes, it still works. And here's the key one. as you go to agentic AI, the agent, the automated agent, is put in as a role. Now, I used to fight this like crazy until agents came along. The agents are not just a resource for the person to help them. The agents are actually a co-worker. So when you do this diagramming, you need to articulate what you want that agent to be able to do in this process. And so this is really helpful if you're trying to put in place bots and things like that and customer service interface boxes and things like that. You can the good news is you can still do your modeling the way you've done it. It's just that we have a new worker in town, and that new worker could be the agent that you've got in place. And hopefully that's good news for you. So now let's have a look at this. With business process management systems, these are sort of like workflow systems that have traditionally passed work from a person to a person to a person, and maybe to a piece of technology and back again. Orchestration logic, the logic of how you orchestrate this, can be inside the BPMS, which keeps control. It says, okay, agent, you've done this, give it back to me. Let me look at it. Now I'm going to give it to a person, or I'm going to give it to another agent. And so it is a highly structured process. It's just that the agent is doing some of the work. Of course, this is part of your design. So the system provides the framework and the sequencing and the control of the life cycle. The agents basically are actors inside the framework, and they perform intelligent work. And it might be something like, can we approve this person for a mortgage? Well, the agent might do a bit of the work, and it comes back and says yes, no, or maybe. And if it's maybe, it's going to go to a person to look at it to figure it out. If it's yes or no, it's going to go a different path, and I can still automate that path, right? And so think about it as an automated worker. So it assigns tasks, and it basically, the point here is that if you're highly regulated, you really need this approach, because if you cannot say, like, so for example, if you cannot say why the claim to an insurance company was rejected, then you cannot support it in court. You cannot support it upon appeal. So you have to be able to show where you made that decision. And so it's auditable. That's the point here. And the workflows are quite structured. So that's one extreme. What's the other extreme? The other extreme is we give it all to an agent, which is sitting inside, and it figures out where to go next. And you don't need the workflow. You will get the answer, but you will not know what path it followed, right? The AI sub-agent performs the intelligent work, but there's an orchestrating agent that figures out what to do next. This is a bit more suitable for research, for knowledge work, for tasks which are a bit more open-ended. And so what we're looking at then is a bit of a structure. Like here, you can have a BPM engine, but you can have a supervisory agent, and the other agents can pass things off to humans or other agents that you're putting in place. You've got to be a bit careful about this design. And it's your you still have to figure out what the work is, but you're figuring out not just what role does it, but what agent does it, and what combination of agents and role makes sense in all of this. Okay. Okay. Regardless of all that, that's just the automation. If you want to get a true capability, you've got to know what is your strategy, who are your stakeholders, what are your policies and rules. You've got to know who is doing what, and what's the motivation, and how are they measured, and what incentives do they have. depending upon your business. If you're in the mining business, your infrastructure is going to be important. Or is it all software, or is it software and people? And are those people able, but do they care, and do they have the capacity? They might be great people, but you don't have enough of them. So we will always go through this in the process to say, is the process supported, and what type of change will we need to have in place? Again, generative AI can be helpful. Right? Okay, the needs in the latest era, latest of the first one going back, process area. We don't get rid of the lower levels. We build on top of the lower levels. So competitive advantage comes from using the right combination. I still want to be efficient. I still I still need to do all those things I did before. I still need to have good customer journeys and so on. It's not one. I'm building on top. I'm getting more and more. Um, but the one thing I think which is good about this is that you can still make your process design explicit. In other words, still build those models. I mean, quite often people say, okay, well, we're going to use AI, so we don't need to do all this. Yes, you do. You still need there's still hope for you to be able to do all this stuff. And you need to design the interaction across the pieces, across the systems, across the people, and not just sitting within one department, not just finance. It's all kinds of other people who are doing parts of the end-to-end workflow. And you need to the pieces which are going to change the most, isolate them from the pieces that are not going to change that much. Not everything changes all the time, right? And the AI could fit into this. So you still need to design your processes and have them make sense for you. It's a BA role. So I've sort of reached the end of this. Um, we will have a look at some of the other things. My partner in this, Wendy Kuhn, and I have written a white paper, which we'll point on the next page. If you're interested in the business architecture book, there is a discount for BAs, and so that can be seen there. By the way, I will make these slides available in the next day or so. And if you're interested in some of these cohesion, how do you keep things working together? Cohesion from fragmentation to flow. If you go to cohesionbydesign.com, you can download the white paper. It's about 22, 23 pages. And download it, look at it, and let me know what you think. We're at the beginning of this journey. We really think the next big stage of all of this is to make the pieces work. We said that before, but I think now there's no choice. There's no choice except the pieces have to work. It's not about data or process or capabilities or business rules or anything. It's about all of those things, which are strategically aligned together. So, okay, there has to be some more questions. Do we have any more? You can make one up now if you wish. Anyone?
Yeah, there's a follow-up question from
Okay,
Rocio in the chat.
sure.
So it says, thinking about reutilization, the AI agents can be working in simultaneous processes at the same time, like adding value,
Yeah,
creating alerts over risks that
it's
are not easily visible for us.
that's a really good point actually. Before I talked about sharing a capability, that capability can be provided by an agent. And if that agent is doing something which is used across multiple processes, then it will show up just as a human would show up, who's performing multiple roles. It would show up in your workflow diagrams. But if you are going to design that agent, you have to know all the places where it shows up in order for you to design it to the set of requirements. It gets the more an agent is used in multiple processes, the more complex it's going to be. And it means you as a business analyst are doing a lot of the work of business architect. I really, by the way, I think that a lot of us are going in that direction. Um, yeah, good question. Really, really good question. Other questions? There are other people out there I know who have questions.
Yeah, so you can feel free to unmute yourself at this time if you do have a
Yeah,
question.
it doesn't have to be through the chat now. We can actually say it, speak it out loud if it's easier to do that for you. Anyone? Does this scare you? Or are you excited by it? What do you think? Anyone? Okay, who is excited but also scared? That's a good question. Because there's opportunity here, but it might mean we have to learn some new things to pull it all together. Anyone? Anyone? Some other people I know out there. A couple of things. Okay. Uh, I saw a face flash out for a second.
Yes, can you see or hear me now?
I can, Michelle.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you, Roger. Well, yes, we have to get there, but